Hi, and welcome to the Gender and Race Intersectional Disproportionality Tool, or the GRID-T. The purpose of this tool is to ask 3 questions and to lend school districts who want to ask the same. That is, what are the patterns of disproportionality in special education department of your school setting? What are the reasons in your local context for these patterns? And what can your school staff do about these patterns? This has the assumption that disproportionality is the under or over representation of any subgroup within any category of disability or the special education department as a whole. A few notes about the GRID-T. Risk ratios will only appear if the school has at least 3 students within the subgroup. For example, at least 3 Hispanic females have to be present under the category of autism for that specific school's risk ratio line to appear. The what next step is crucial for practitioners. It's imperative to note that the patterns within each subgroup require the school to ask why and what can we do about it. For example, the GRID-T might reveal that Black females are underrepresented in the category of autism, and males, white males, are overrepresented in this category. These findings would require different actions. The GRID-T presents something called a risk ratio. Quickly, I will walk you through how we calculated these ratios. First, we looked at the number of a certain subgroup, let's say Hispanic females, in the specific disability category or the total special education department. Then we divided that by the number of Hispanic females enrolled in the school. This is the risk index for Hispanic females, and it tells us how likely it is for a Hispanic female at that school to be placed in special education or a specific disability category. That's not very helpful without the presence of a comparison group. This can be either the rest of the population, excluding Hispanic females, or white females. For this, we calculate the risk index again by dividing the number of the comparison group in the specific disability category and the number of the comparison group enrolled in the school as a whole. After we calculate the risk indexes for these 2 groups, we can then calculate the risk ratio. We calculate the risk ratio by dividing the risk index for Hispanic females by the risk index for the comparison group. This risk ratio can either be 1, which means it is exactly, the likelihood is exactly the same for Hispanic females and the comparison group to be placed in special education. It can be under 1, between 1 and 0, which would mean that it is less likely for Hispanic females to be in that special education category. Or it could be greater than 1, which would mean that Hispanic females are more likely to be in that special education category. These risk ratios for the total public schools in the United States are represented in a histogram. This histogram has the risk ratios along the bottom, and then the frequency of those risk ratios on the y-axis. So the histogram itself can show us, wow, it looks like mostly Hispanic females, this is not the histogram for Hispanic females, but Hispanic females would be considered mostly overrepresented based on this histogram, because there's a lot above the number 1. There's a lot of frequency of risk ratios above the number 1. And then the individual lines plotted are going to be the individual schools we're looking at with their risk ratio. Now, each school's line will also have a color. This color will be marking either major underrepresentation, proportionate, overrepresentation, or major overrepresentation. These categories were decided upon based on the state requirements for overrepresentation, but they are still in process. It's important to look at both the color and the placement in comparison to the national data to get a better understanding of your school's risk ratio. If your school data does not show up, then try to follow these steps. Look at the total special education population for your subgroup at that school. That's a bigger sample set. So that might have a result that might be a little more telling than the specific disability categories for your school. You can also look at your school feeder line, like the elementary school in your district or the high school in your district. That might have a few more students that might be helpful to see where the trajectory for the students in your district is. You might also want to look at special education rosters in your school and just ask yourself and your staff, hey, what groups seem to be overrepresented or underrepresented? It would also still be beneficial for you to read through the What Next articles and draw up a plan. How are you intentionally trying to provide appropriate and equitable special education services for all students at your school? Overall, I hope this is a helpful process for you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks for using the Grid T, and I hope that you have a great day.